Marketer of the Day, Episode 637. Hire a full-time assistant in the Philippines. Outsource forum posting, programming, graphic design, customer support, and more with Jonas.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Marketer of the Day podcast. And I have a simple question for you. Can you get more done in your business? And would you like to get more done in your business without you having to do a lot of extra work or put in a lot of extra time? Well, if that's the case, then you're going to want to sit up and pay very close attention to our conversation today with Jonas from onlinejobs.ph. And John has helped thousands of entrepreneurs succeed in their business by doing outsourcing differently. And John created and runs onlinejobs.ph, which is the largest website for finding Filipino virtual workers with over 500,000 Filipino resumes and hundreds of thousands of employers around the world using it. And John works about 17 hours a week, and he chooses to spend time with his family rather than working. So we're going to talk about how you can tap into some of the things John has figured out and get similar, if not better, results of having a business that in a lot of ways runs itself and you're just there steering the ship, and then you have the rest of your life left over to live your own life the way that you want to and do the things you want to do and have that freedom. So John, glad to be talking to you.
Hey, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm super glad to have you here. Super glad that you're here as well. And so I've only been doing this whole interview thing for maybe 3 years or so, but I would say that at least half the time when I ask people about their number one secret or the thing that took them a while to figure out when they finally did things change, the answer to that question is more than half the time is outsourcing, is finally letting go a little bit, being less of a control freak, reinvesting a tiny bit of their business back into itself and outsourcing and getting some of these workers who can perform these repetitive tasks so that way they have more time in the day. That way they're not overworking themselves. Outsourcing seems to be the thing that everyone says is the number one secret. So what do you think about that? Do you agree?
It's life-changing, man. And I would even say, I would take it a step further. I would say outsourcing kind of a different way is the thing that really changes people. Because there's outsourcing that people know, and people don't really care because it's kind of crappy. But there's a different way that most people just don't know, and it, when I stumbled into this 15 years ago, it changed my life. So, yeah, totally.
Well, I'm excited to find out from you about what that different way is, because I know that at least for me, and I don't think I'm alone here, but for me, when people kept saying outsource or hire more, for me it fell on deaf ears. I told myself, I'll get to that when I have more things figured out. I'll get to that when the money's better or when I have money set aside. And for years, to my detriment, I ignored this advice of outsourcing. And for me, what actually got me to do it was to start small and gradually work it in and realize that it's not all or nothing, and not just make a real drastic jump. And so it took a while from different people to hear about their own unique way of outsourcing and hearing some of these case studies. So I'm really curious to hear from you. What is that different way of outsourcing that you've tapped into?
So I'm going to tell you a quick story that kind of illustrates a bunch of what you're saying. So a couple of years ago, my brother contacts me. He knows what I do, right? And he contacts me and was like, "Hey, man, I need to hire someone, I think. But I don't really know, and I don't know that I have full-time work," and right. So he goes through this, and I was like, "Dude, hire someone full-time." So he does. He comes back to me a couple months later and says, "Dude, I had no idea how much work there was to do until I hired someone full-time, and then I realized, oh my gosh, there's so much work to do, and I can get so much stuff done hiring this full-time person." And so that's that one thing is really the difference, the different way of doing this than what everybody wants to do. What everybody wants to do is a super low commitment. I just want to hire a contract worker. I pay them hourly. If I don't keep them busy, that's not my problem. That's their problem. They work for me on this project, so I don't have a long-term commitment to them. And then when I'm done with this project, they're done. I don't have any more expense. And that's all fine and good. And that's how I started. And the problem is it guarantees 100% turnover in your business. Like that's the whole idea behind contract work is you're going to do this work. That's the whole idea behind Upwork. The premise is you do some work for someone, you get paid, you get a review so that you can get another job easier and charge more for that other job because you've been reviewed positively, right? Which leaves the first employer like with 100% turnover. And that was the thing that for me 15 years ago was like, dude, this sucks. I don't want to teach someone to do something and then have them like pay them and give them a review, whatever, and they move on. And then now when I want it again in 6 months, I have to go find someone. And it just didn't work for me. So what ended up kind of changing my view about everything was when I got a reference to where I could hire someone full time in the Philippines. And the full time thing, like what my brother said, was like, man, I don't know if I can keep him busy full time. I don't know if I can afford him full time. It was a $750 a month commitment for me at the time, and I don't know. I mean, I was a small business and I just didn't have it, right? And finally, I took the leap, and it was the single most liberating experience of my life, where all of a sudden I had this guy whose full time job was to do anything I asked him to do. He could do anything I was willing to train him to do, and so I could get like full things off of my plate that I was trying to do or was doing, and that he was now doing for me as I taught him. And that got me hours back in my life. And that was the beginning of this realizing, oh my gosh, I can get anything done. I can get it done long term. I can get it done as well as I can do it or better. And I don't ever have to think about it again. And there's some specific cultural things with the Philippines in there that really makes a difference here. But that's kind of this different way where typically we want to do contract work or freelance work. And I'm saying the better way is to hire a full-time person, or it could be a part-time person, but long-term. That long-term makes all the difference in the world in terms of you becoming the CEO of your business rather than the grunt worker in your business. So I hope that makes sense.
It does. And I like the way that you put that, in that many times we'll fall into that Upwork trap that you mentioned there of saying, well, I know I need to hire someone, but let me just make a list of like all these tasks I do, and let me just hire someone for one task. And it seems like a lot of work on your part before you even hire someone to take some of the work away from you. It seems sort of paradoxical. And then I've experienced that exact same thing that you're mentioning there of you're hiring people that are on their way up, right? It's like they're not completely new, they're not completely untrained. They know a few things, but they're also not so advanced in their own journey that they're charging crazy rates. So you're kind of catching them in this middle ground, but then they're only going to be in that middle ground for 6, 12, 18 months. And then you're going to spend all this time getting to know them and finding the right person, and then getting them to start doing things. And once things are going great, well, then now they moved on from you, got their review, charging more onto better clients, and then leaving you in the dust, and you have to scramble again. So yeah, it definitely seems like a recipe for spending a big chunk of your time just trying to find someone to replace the last person. And so I like your philosophy, your strategy here of finding that long-term person and just having them do all this stuff full time. So when you hired this $750 a month full-time Filipino worker, like, what did you have them do? Because I know that you mentioned in there a little bit that whole fear of, well, is there enough for them to do? And am I just like throwing money at them just for them to sit around for a few days? So what sorts of things did you have this full-time worker do, and how did you keep them busy?
Okay, so before I answer that, let me go back into a couple things. Number one, it takes just as much time to recruit a freelancer as it does to recruit a full-time long-term person. So that's a big deal. Number two, this first person that you're talking about right now still works for me today, and that was 15 years ago. And when I hired him, he didn't know anything. And that's not that that's how everything's going to be in this, but the idea here is you're going to hire someone who you're going to train. You're going to spend time with them. And I know everybody listening to this thinks, I don't have time to train someone. No, I just want to hire someone who already knows. And that's the whole reason why you should train, is because you don't have time to train. Train them to do something you're currently doing and get that thing off of your plate. Something that you know how to do, something you're good at. Get it off of your plate. That right there is like, that will change everything about this. So what did I hire him to do? It doesn't really matter what I hired him to do, because it was something that I was currently doing. What matters is what other people, what do you have going on right now in your business, in your life, that you could teach someone else to do? I'll tell you, I hired him to do some article marketing for me. So I was writing articles, which I despise doing, and I was submitting them to different places online. And this tactic doesn't work the same today as it did then, but we were submitting them to article directories and to blogs and whatever. And we were finding ways to link them to our website and link them to each other and link them to other things that we owned. And the whole process took hours, and I hated it. And so I hired him. He wrote the first article. It was terrible. And I went back and structured it for him. No, here's how we write these things. Here's the best way. And then I taught him how to do the resource boxes and the links and the titles, and I taught him how to do all this stuff. And once he got it right, and this isn't an overnight, this isn't a magic bullet, right? It took a while. It took a while of me going back and forth with him to get it right. But after a week, that was 15 years ago, right? I've never even thought about this since, because he just does it. And then the next thing that I taught him to do added on to it, and they built on each other. And the next thing that I taught him to do built on that. And pretty soon you have, once you have this person, you're teaching them more and more, the more things start to connect with them and start to click. And the less you need to spend with them and the more capable they are. So I could go over a list of things that you can get done, if that's interesting.
Yeah, that sounds helpful. And even I know that you said that article marketing has sort of gone by the wayside, but there's still, similar tasks to that. They're still writing blog content. They're still getting podcast guests or prospective coaching calls. There's still that, maybe not that exact task, but similar sub activities where they have a structure, they have some sort of a template, they do somewhat of that technical writing where they might not know any of it, and then they get to know the ins and outs, and maybe you have a little bit of that patience, a little back and forth, and spend a few weeks getting them up to speed. But even though article marketing exactly is not the same, I can still get help that applies today. So yeah, I'm eager to jump in. What sort of modern day things have been really useful for you for outsourcing with these Filipinos?
Okay, so I have 24 full-time people in the Philippines who work for me. And when you said getting podcast guests, I don't do that because I don't run a podcast, but I do have a person in the Philippines who gets me onto podcasts, right? So she's doing lead generation for me, basically. You said writing blog content. Yeah, I have people that write blog posts. If you go to onlinejobs.ph and look at the blog posts there, yeah, I didn't really write any of them, even though they're credited to me. So I hate writing, but I have really, really, really good writers in the Philippines. And you would never know that they wrote it, not me. Or along the lines of article marketing, I have someone who posts in forums. That's her job. Your job is to participate in forums, add value to the forums. You don't always have to talk about online jobs, but sometimes you can. And just contribute to the forums, become a member of the community. You're marketing our business and you're participating, and it's something. So in one forum, she participates as me, under my name, and other forums, she participates as my VA, or she participates as herself in some of them. So that's one other thing. So, and those are writing content, right? So of the 24 people I have a bunch of programmers, and they're really, really talented PHP programmers. I have a server admin. I have a couple guys that do HTML, CSS, front end work. I have a JavaScript programmer. I have an iOS programmer. I have a couple graphic designers. I have an HR person. I have a bunch of customer support people. I have a bunch of admin people, like I have some data analyst people. Trying to think of what else do I have? What else do we do? So we have customers I know that, like hiring real estate virtual assistants, like to process paperwork or to schedule appointments or to do marketing. Lead generation is super common. There's so anything that you can teach someone to do online, if it's done online, you can get someone else to do it.
Awesome. So with all those possibilities, is there a logical jumping in point? Like, do you tell people to like look at the things we're doing, and like you mentioned before, to even if you're good at a thing, outsource it? Do you recommend that like people like look at what they're doing and then take a piece of that out, or is there like a really common task? Like, should everyone jump in on like the lead gen or the forum posting or the customer support? What's an easy way to get bit by the bug of outsourcing for some of the stuff, so to speak?
So what I have always recommended, and this is what I started with, and this is different than what most people tell you, but I don't recommend you go and get someone to build your website if you don't know how to build your website. I recommend you outsource something you know how to do and something you're good at. Get that off of your plate, because whatever it is that you know how to do that you're good at, unless like you make a living even if you make a living doing video editing, hire someone to do the thing that you're good at, because there's something else that you can be doing in your business that is worth more money. Like your time is worth more doing something else. So like for me, in the beginning, that thing was article marketing because I hated it. And I could make more money by focusing on writing sales copy. And today I can hire someone else to write sales copy, and I can focus more on thinking through problems and telling other people what to do. But the number one thing that I see people succeed with is to find something you know how to do. And you can make a list or whatever, but you already know, like, here's this one thing that I do that I could teach someone. It might take me a month to teach someone, going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and they're getting it wrong and wrong and wrong and wrong and wrong. But once they get it right, because this is an intelligent human being you're hiring. This isn't a robot. It's not a dummy. Like, they're smart and they want to do it right, and they want to do it the way you want to do it. You want it done. Take that thing, hire someone with some of the skills that you want, or one of the skills that you want, but really, unless it's a technical position, unless it's video editing, unless it's graphic design, unless it's programming, unless it's, website, whatever, hire someone with really good English, and then teach them how to do what it is that you want done and get something off of your plate. And yes, it'll take you more time. Like, this is the biggest objection. I don't have time for that. And you're right, you don't, but you can't afford not to. Like, you're working 50 hours a week. This is going to cost you 56 hours this week. It's going to cost you 6 more hours. And next week it's going to be 56. And the week after it's going to be 56. Then the week after it's going to be 42 instead of 50.
More
like
long term.
Yeah, long term. Then you're at 42, and then you do it again. And I say I work 17 hours a week because over the last 10 years, that's been about the average. Right now I'm at about 12. And I've been at about 12 for a couple of years now. Just like, if I can get in 15 hours a week, I'm happy. My family's so used to it now that I have a hard time getting in 15 hours.
You're almost at that 4-hour work week.
Yeah, so I've been there at the 4-hour work week, and it just wasn't enough for me. Like, I need something to do. I need something to keep my brain engaged. So.
Well, that's a good problem to have, right? A lot of people are scrambling and struggling and stressed out and just appointments back to back, and you're like, I'm looking for more things to do. Too many people are doing my work for me.
Right. And so, so here's the thing that I didn't realize in the beginning. I'm doing all this work, and I hire these guys, and I think they can only do menial tasks when I hired them. I quickly realized, these guys aren't so bad, and they can do more. But the real difference between hiring hourly versus full-time versus like you're going to pay them a salary, a wage, right? Not a wage, a salary. Whether they show up or not, you're going to pay the salary. Here's the biggest difference. Hourly, you do your job. If you're not busy, I don't care, right? It's not my problem. I'm too busy to deal with you. When you hire someone full-time and you're going to pay them this wage, now it is my problem. If you finished your work and you don't have something to do, that's my problem because I'm paying for it. And what I found and what I've seen thousands of employers find is now I have to come up with something for you to do that's going to build my business. And that hiring full-time versus hourly just forced you to step away from working in your business and work on your business. And that's like the big, it took me like a year and a half to recognize this, to realize that, oh my gosh, I'm forced into this shift of working on my business because I hired these people full-time because I made this commitment, instead of, no, I'm just going to keep working in my business. I have emails to answer, where we get stuck.
And I like your getting off the plate philosophy a lot here, because it's like we kind of trash talked the Upwork sort of stuff earlier, where it's easy to just dip your toe in the water and not have that commitment and then backslide and say, oh, I tried to pay that person for that thing. It didn't work out. I'll just jump back in and do it. And then years pass and you still haven't jumped into that outsourcing thing. But I really like your strategy here of saying, well, here's this thing that I do. And even though I could do it, I'll outsource that piece so that way I can move myself on to the next step, right? To go from, well, I'm spending all day long article marketing, I'll hire that part out and then move on to sales copy. Then hire that part out, move on to the kind of the bigger picture, the thinking. I like that a lot because you already know how to do it. You already know how to check and see if it's done. And then that problem of finding something to keep the person busy is already built in because it's currently keeping you busy. So it's not like you have to invent some new tasks to do. So that's a pretty awesome new way of looking at things. And, we're beginning to get to the point where we're going to run out of time in our conversation soon, but I want to make sure that we cover something they mentioned almost at the beginning, which was the cultural difference of working with the Philippines. So, why should we work with the Philippines specifically, and what sorts of culture clash should we be expecting here?
So there's a bunch of things in the Philippines that make this different than anywhere else. I'll start with a couple of them. Number one, Filipinos are honest, to the point where my guys in the Philippines have my credit cards. They have access to my personal email account. So they want to be honest with you. If you find someone that's being dishonest, usually my experience is it's not actually them being dishonest. It's you giving poor instructions, and they think that they don't know what to do. And I can get into that in a minute. But they're super honest. And obviously not everyone. So don't take this like, oh, everybody's honest. Second, and this is probably the biggest deal, is they're loyal almost to it being a fault. So when they get a job offer, making more money, they're not going to jump ship and take that other job offer. The first person I hired, again, still works for me today, 15 years later. I of my team of 24, I have people that have worked for me for, 13 years, 12 years, 10 years, all along it, right? Like we've grown more recently, so I've been hiring more people, but people don't quit as long as you treat them well. And that is a big deal for long-term building a business. They have computers and internet access, so that's not an issue. So when I told you I was paying $750 a month 15 years ago, that's because I was paying a service $750 a month. They were paying the worker $250. He was making $250 a month for full-time work. So today, if you hired that same person, 15 years later, salaries have gone up. You're probably paying $450 a month for that same person. But that's for full-time work. And now that's why we started online jobs, so you don't have to go through a service to hire someone. Their English, like they watch American TV, they watch American movies. English will never be an issue. Communication will never, ever be an issue. They're not entrepreneurial, and that's such a big deal. They don't want to steal your business. They don't want to take your idea and go do it on their own. I can tell you stories of guys in the Philippines building businesses for me where I'm just telling them what to do, and they build the business from start to finish, like businesses that are making me $15,000 a month, and they're sending me a report of how much money the business is making, and how much money they're spending to make that money. And they built the entire thing, and they don't go do it on their own, right? Because they're not entrepreneurial. So the biggest cultural issue that you'll run into is Filipinos want to make you happy. It's like an inherent cultural thing, but they're also what they call shy. They say we're shy, but really it's a lose face thing. So they want to make you happy. If they're worried that you're not going to be happy with them, then they don't want to lose face, and they would rather disappear or lose their job than be embarrassed by you and make you unhappy. So when someone doesn't understand instructions, they assume it's their fault, and they don't want to say anything to you about it, and because that would make you unhappy, and so they'll just say nothing, which is very different than other places in the world where they'll say yes, right? Like, hey, how's the project going? Yes. Are you working on it? Yes. Is it going to be done on time? Yes. And that's all they ever say is yes, right? In the Philippines, they say nothing. So when there's a problem, when they don't understand something, when they don't want to do something, when they don't know how to do something, when they don't like doing something, they just say nothing and they disappear. And that's the number one cultural issue you run into. So if you're aware of this, you can easily solve it. Number one, when I hire someone, I tell them, you can't disappear. So when you have a problem, I expect you to come to me, which doesn't always solve it, but sometimes it will. But then even more important, when someone stops communicating with you, recognize this. It's not because they're lazy. It's not because they don't want the job. It's not because they jumped ship. It's because they're stuck on something. They don't know what to do. And if you recognize that, you'll solve 90% of the problems in doing this. Because you can go to them and say, hey, you haven't communicated with me in 4 days. What's going on? What are you stuck on? I know you're stuck on something. And that's when they'll say, yeah, you're right, sir. I'm stuck on this thing. I don't know how to do it. And then you can solve the problem with them. So does that make sense? Is that?
Yeah, it does. And I mean, I'm sure you dealt with like the miscommunications early on with, outsourcing in all kinds of different countries and different cultures. And that helps so much, just to know what the template is, so to speak, to know what that, like the common response is, right? And
Yeah.
so yeah, that helps so much that if they're stuck, if they don't know, then their tendency is to do nothing. And so by managing those expectations, by having some of that follow-up, by calling them out, so to speak, on the problem that they're afraid to bring up to you, I mean, yeah, that could save, all kinds of relationships from not working out with some of these workers, from, avoiding having to waste months of training the person and then having that weird miscommunication and then it falling apart. So I think that helps a lot, where if they're stuck, they'll say nothing. So it's important, if you hear nothing from them for a few days, to circle back around and then say, I know you're stuck. Tell me, I want to help. That's really cool. And so, right. I mean, you've gotten me kind of re-energized and re-excited to look into this Filipino full-time thing, because I mean, yeah, like I've fallen in that trap for sure of hiring one person for one thing, and then like it doesn't always work out ideally for that. And so if people go to onlinejobs.ph right now, what's the next step? Is it easy to get an account, hire a person? What's sort of the process once they go there?
So the number one thing I think to do is to go and just look at the profiles, look at the resumes, do a search for a skill that you want and see what exists. There's over 500,000 profiles there, and you can find basically any skill. So go and do a search and just get an idea of what there is and what people are. You can't contact those people yet until you have signed up for an account and paid, but you can go on and post a job. You sign up for an account. I mean, that's like email, password. That's it. You post a job and you'll get people applying to your job, and you can see the applications to judge, like, am I going to find someone good before you ever pay? So you can see, skills, you can see how many people have applied. You can't contact anybody, you can't interview anybody until you've paid, and that's $69. Uh, and then you're free. Then you're like contacting them, and all emails will come to your inbox, so you can contact them through your Gmail. You could also use the onlinejobs.ph inbox, but you can do whatever you want. And then recognize this is different than other outsourcing, where like at Upwork, you're going to go and look at their reviews. At Online Jobs, there are no reviews, because an employer who finds a good worker doesn't leave a review saying, "Oh my gosh, this guy's amazing. Please try and hire him away from me." Right? Like you find someone good, you hire them full time, long term. So it's your job to kind of vet the people. You're gonna interview them. You're gonna check their skills however you can. This is like hiring someone locally at 1/10 the cost. So does that make sense?
It does. And one thing that I keep having to tell myself internally, and I guess it's like a relearning thing, is there's no reviews to look at, and don't necessarily hire a person based on what they already do, what they already know. This is more of playing the long game. This is more of getting someone who's a blank slate, and then you training them over a month or so. And then that way, that Filipino loyalty will kick in because you've trained them, because now, because of you, they're getting this full-time income. They're supporting their family. They'll never leave. And then you don't have to deal with the turnover, the hiring, firing. I mean, this seems like a really wonderful way to go about it, a much better way than that stereotypical, cutthroat, fast-paced outsourcing thing. So the place for everyone to go is onlinejobs.ph. And anything else you feel like throwing in here as we just put a button on this thing and wrap up?
Yeah, I got two things. So first, you can hire skilled people. So like for you, for example, you want to hire an audio editor for your podcast or whatever. You're going to remove all the ums and ahs and whatever. It's completely reasonable to go in and find an audio editor and say, "Hey, remove all of this." And he's going to know what to do, right? So it's completely reasonable to hire a graphic designer who's really skilled, or a programmer, or an audio editor, or a video editor. So that's one. You don't have to train everything, but at the same time, you hire this audio editor. There's some specific. You have a style. You can teach that style, right? Okay. So the second thing that I want to add is this doesn't work for everybody, because some people expect perfection right away. You have zero tolerance for something not being done correctly. And that's not me. I have a little bit of tolerance for it. Like, I'm willing to spend some time teaching someone or bringing them up to speed or whatever. But you won't know that until you've tried it. Like, you don't know if this works for you until you've tried it. You have to just give it a shot. For me, it took me a couple months when I first heard about it, before I jumped in. Like I said, I debated or went back and forth for a couple of months. And when I hired him, it was the most liberating experience of my life. But the potential upside here is you get hours, you buy time. That's really what I say in the end. If it works, you buy time. If it doesn't work, fine, you're out a couple $100. Fine. If it does, I don't know of any other way to buy time. So.
Yeah, and I think it's worth the risk. I think it's worth the experiment. I mean, if you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to get the same results you've always gotten. So if option number one of scrambling and trying to do everything yourself is not sustainable, then maybe it's time to take some of that stuff off your plate, offload some of that stuff. And if option number two of always hiring this person and that person and dealing with the drama, if that's also not working out, then maybe it's time to give onlinejobs.ph a shot. If you have that little bit of patience, if you don't expect perfection right away, but knowing that this is culture, they are easily trained, they are eager to please, they're very smart, they can get up to speed. And also, I like how you said there that you can hire someone with pre-existing skills if you want. You go through that directory, you look at the people that are there, you get those creative juices flowing. You can find someone who is the right fit, either who is unskilled and can learn things your way, or already has their flow, already has their style. I mean, this is all kinds of amazing stuff for us to think about. So the place for everyone to go right now, whether you're ready to jump in or just to browse the listings and see what kinds of possibilities are right there in front of you, onlinejobs.ph, to investigate this outsourcing to the Philippines sort of stuff. So we'll see you over there, onlinejobs.ph. And thanks so much, John, for sharing some of your story with us and opening our eyes towards what we can do to buy ourselves more time. So I appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me. This has been really great.
Subscribe to us right now while it's still fresh on your mind at marketeroftheday.com/iTunes.